Hi, thanks for coming. The Hero Forge. So just like heroes, books have origin stories, and this one does too. So this book emerged from the birth of my son, but also from the death of my father. This is Dad, and he was a career soldier. He had multiple combat deployments, and growing up, he taught me to live by a code. I didn't realize it at the time, but I now find myself trying to pass that code on to my son, Kit. I decided not to follow in Dad's footsteps. As you've heard from Matt, I'm a school teacher, and when I'm not knee-deep in marking and lesson plans, I tend to try and encourage the young people in my care to grow into their own heroic imaginations, sometimes in unusual ways. So, for example, not so long ago, I led a group of 60 of them between the ages of 11 and 15, barefoot across burning hot coals to raise money for local charities. The risk assessment for that one raised a few eyebrows in my common room, as you can imagine. And I've worked with young people now for over 20 years, and despite what the media might suggest, my impression is that we're in very good hands, but we can't just leave it all to the kids to look after tomorrow. Now, when Dad had me, he was 26 years old, and when I had Kit, I was already in my 40s. I wasn't mature enough before that time. I'm still not sure I'm mature enough now. But I realized in having Kit that my days might be numbered. And so a year ago when my dad died, suddenly, we had 6 weeks' notice from diagnosis of cancer to death, I started scribbling down my thoughts about this code that I'd been introduced to. The idea being that if I have my ticket punched sooner rather than later, I can leave something for Kit, to at least know what I stand for and believe in. And during this deep dive into all things heroic, I've come to learn a few things. And the first one is that heroes are not born. They are made. And the second is that there are no barriers to entry. If you're drawing breath, then you can make a difference. But I've also come across what I'm referring to as the 4 PR problems of heroism, and that's what I'm here to share with you today. So PR problem number 1 is the issue of the word hero, because we refer to it as a noun, but in fact it probably should be a verb. We should be talking about heroing, however awkward that sounds. When the heroing stops, the hero essentially evaporates. They disappear until they're called upon to be of service again. That's why Matt and others talk about the opposite to a hero not being a villain, but a bystander, someone who chooses not to act. And this idea of choice, I think, is a really important one, because in any given moment, we have a choice. We can become active co-creators of a better world, or we can abdicate our responsibility and just submit to the status quo. So the first thing that I wanted to address was this idea of what does it take to make the choice. I think that heroes act because somewhere along the line they come to this realization that there are no ordinary moments. For me, Dad's death was a reminder of that we don't know how many we've got, so we better make each one count. So the first message for me is that I invite you to recognize that this moment's the moment where we want to make a difference. PR problem number 2 is this issue of the mask and the cape, because fun as they might be, we don't need them. And in fact, we've become so used to outsourcing our security and our salvation to the emergency services and the government and other external authority figures that I think that we've become conditioned to look towards a uniform rather than towards ourselves and each other in our hour of need. And there are times where that's absolutely the right thing to do, to put ourselves in the hands of professionals. I'm not advocating DIY brain surgery or that we should take up vigilantism. But I don't think along the way we should allow ourselves to become infantilized. And so to that end, I devised something in the book called a heroic inventory. And it's a series of practical questions that we can ask ourselves to see whether we can build a roadmap towards practically being more likely to answer the call and be helpful in the future. So it's questions like this, and as I ask them, reflect on them perhaps. So question number 1, can you perform CPR and basic first aid? Question number 2, can you swim well enough to rescue someone in danger of drowning? Question 3, could you protect yourself or someone else in the face of potential violence? Now, what I'm not saying is that we all need to be Jason Bourne or Lara Croft in order to make a difference. But I do think that there is a direct relationship between our physical, emotional, and our mental competencies and our ability to affect positive change. And so just as you've been challenged to meet new people today, My challenge for you, and I'll be running a workshop tomorrow on this same theme, is to make the commitment to develop one practical skill in the next 3 to 6 months that will mean that you are even more capable than you already are. I think one of the reasons why the gravitational pull of the bystander effect is so strong is because we have a sense of impotence. But if we can develop real-world agency, we're more likely to be the ones that step forward and make a difference. So if you are around tomorrow as well, please do come along. I'd love to talk more about this idea. PR problem number 3 is the boogeyman. And because our stories are the ways in which we celebrate heroes, and the best stories tend to be the most dramatic, I think that we tend to celebrate heroes in our popular cultural imagination who slay monsters, or at least do battle with them. But I've come to believe that the boogeyman and the hero who vanquishes him are actually distracting us from our real job. And I came to that belief because I asked myself, where does most of the so-called evil in this world come from? And I've arrived at the unpalatable truth, for me at least, that it emerges often out of my ignorance and indifference. So we're so distracted, so busy, and so bogged down in our own lives that we sometimes fail to see the call for help that's right in front of us. So this led me to think about this idea of what does the everyday hero commit themselves to doing? Because I don't think it's about stealing headlines or about winning a certain number of column inches. There are monsters in the world, and there are despots and corrupt institutions against which we should take a stand. But they don't emerge into the world fully formed. Most so-called monsters grow in dark places where compassion and community and kindness have failed them. And for that reason, I think that the everyday heroes, as well as perhaps dashing into a burning building or doing something that puts their life on the line, should also commit themselves to those daily tasks, working quietly in the background to bring a little more light to where there are shadows. I think that's where we can have our most profound impact. And with that in mind, no act that we perform is too small, and we have no idea how far outwards the ripples might travel from the acts we carry out. PR problem number 4 is the issue of the mask and the cape. PR problem number 4 is the issue of what I call the Shackleton dilemma. So Shackleton, 1914, he's preparing for the endurance expedition, and he posts a notice in the Times, and apparently it reads like this: men wanted for hazardous journey, low wages, bitter cold, long hours of total darkness, safe return, doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success. Now, apparently this terrible piece of advertising is apocryphal. It's unlikely to have actually been printed in word for word like that. But I suspect that even if it had been, there would have still been a line of volunteers waiting to set sail with Shackleton, because in an entropic universe where our life energy and our time are always depleting, heroes tend to give of themselves anyway. They step forward and answer the call. The problem with that is that suffering and sacrifice are only ever going to appeal to a rare breed of people. So the question that I asked myself in writing the book was this: how can we make more people more likely to step forward and do the right thing or the brave thing more often? And my answer is this: I think that we need to think about heroing as being something that is both about giving but also about growing. Because if we are people who develop situational awareness, and if we are present and looking for opportunities to help, then we tend to show up in our own lives more often as well, which become richer. If we are pro-social and we are committed to raising a healthy community, then our own lives become embodied with meaningful relationships. If we step outside of our comfort zone, then we look back and we've got lives that are adventurous and colorful rather than just safe. And finally, to come full circle, if we choose to live by a code, if we along the way realize what we're prepared to sacrifice ourselves and if necessary die for, then somehow we discover the secret to actually living. And so the position I've arrived at in terms of everyday heroism is this: I think heroism is an alchemical process. I think out of the base materials of our mundane lives, we get the opportunity to forge something rather magical. And so the message I'd like to share with you and to take away today is a kind of combination of those things. Let's commit ourselves to heroing, thinking about what we're going to do rather than what we might become. Let's throw away the mask and the cape, except for parties and special occasions. Thank you. Let's not be too distracted by the boogeyman. And if Shackleton or someone like him does come calling and invites us to take up a challenge, then why not set sail and make all of our lives something that turn out to be quite extraordinary? So thank you very much for listening.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.